Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Myung-gil in Seoul. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. Washington is clamping down on North Korea's cash flow, informing financial institutions they can choose to either do business with the U.S. or North Korea, but not both. U.S.-based business magazine Forbes has named Samsung Group as one of the 5 most influential companies in Asia, citing the company's achievement in the tech sector. These stories and more coming right up. We begin with our top story on this Friday afternoon. In accordance with President Trump's latest executive order, Washington is giving the world 2 options, but it's a choice with only one serious answer. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin told global financial institutions to decide whether they want to do business with the United States or North Korea. Our Park Hee-jun starts us off.
The U.S. Treasury Secretary says no bank in any country should be used to facilitate Kim Jong-un's destructive behavior. Steven Mnuchin made the remarks to reporters while announcing a fresh set of U.S. sanctions against Pyongyang. In particular, he said global banks must make a crucial choice.
Foreign financial institutions are now on notice that going forward, they can choose to do business with the United States or with North Korea, but not both.
His comments are being seen as an ultimatum to those institutions that were not subject to the previous sanctions. The latest U.S. sanctions include asset freezes on individuals and a suspension of corresponding account access in the United States for banks who work with North Korea. The remarks are based on President Trump's executive order that grants the Treasury Department additional authority aimed at helping to cut off international trade and financing used by the regime.
Our new executive order will cut off sources of revenue that fund North Korea's efforts to develop the deadliest weapons known to humankind.
One of the gists of the order is banning vessels and aircraft that have visited North Korea or engaged in a ship-to-ship transfer with a ship that has visited North Korea in the last 6 months from visiting the U.S. for 180 days. Meanwhile, in a brief public remarks ahead of the trilateral summit with South Korea and Japan, President Trump heaped praise on Chinese President Xi Jinping. He said President Xi had ordered Chinese banks to cease conducting business with North Korean entities, saying the move was very bold and somewhat unexpected. U.S. officials acknowledged that, like other sanctions, the fresh batch of measures may not deter North Korea, but is aimed at slowing the country down. Park Hee-jun, Business Daily.
Seoul's trade minister has requested a second meeting with his American counterpart on possible amendments to the South Korea-U.S. free trade deal. Kim Hyun-jong made the offer in a letter to Robert Lighthizer following their first face-to-face meeting in Washington earlier this week. He expressed hope that both sides can engage in discussions with an open mind to maximize the mutual benefits of the FTA. He proposed working-level consultations in the coming days to draw up the details of the meeting, including the date and agenda. The talks come following President Trump's denouncement of the FTA, which he blames for Washington's growing trade deficit with Seoul. The 7th Asia-Europe Economic Forum has officially kicked off in Seoul, with some 250 ministers from over 50 countries in attendance. In his opening speech, Korea's Trade Minister Baek Eun-gyu said Asia and Europe together make up 70% of world trade and called for ways to ensure inclusive and sustainable growth. Minister Baek had hoped to meet with his Chinese counterpart about Beijing's economic retaliation over Korea's deployment of the THAAD missile defense system. But the opportunity fell through after China decided instead to send its Vice Minister of Trade. Forbes magazine has named Samsung Group as one of Asia's 5 most influential companies. The U.S. business magazine released its list of the 5 firms that have shaped Asia and the world on Friday and cited Samsung as a shining example. Our Park Ji-won has the details.
U.S.-based financial magazine Forbes selected Korea's tech giant and the world's largest smartphone maker Samsung as one of the 5 most influential companies that have shaped Asia and the world. The U.S. magazine told the story of Samsung's growth from its beginnings as a small distribution enterprise in 1938 and analyzed Chairman Lee Kun-hee's major shift in business strategy during the 1990s as a turning point for the company. Forbes said Lee's so-called Frankfurt Declaration of 1993, which included his famous quote, "Change everything but your wife and children," has turned a mediocre electronics company into the world's second-largest tech firm. The magazine also said the Asian tiger economies of Hong Kong, Taiwan, and South Korea, which experienced rapid growth in the late 20th century, continue to be relevant and inspire other Asian countries today. Other firms on the list were Toyota Motor, Sony, India-based HDFC Bank, and China's online commerce giant Alibaba Group. And the magazine said these companies have helped make Asia a global powerhouse with a strong economic outlook. Park Ji-won, Business Daily.
And now moving on to our coverage of markets, we have our contributor Lee Ji-hye on the line with us. Hello, Ji-hye.
Hello, Myung-gil.
So tell us how local stocks performed on the last trading day of the week.
Sure, Myung-gil. Local stocks were mostly mixed today, with geopolitical tension looming after North Korea's strong rhetoric in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's speech at the United Nations General Assembly earlier this week. The benchmark Kospi was down 0.74% to close at 2,388.71, while the Kospi also fell 1.84% to close at 648.95. As for market bellwether Samsung Electronics, it was up 3.8%, and SK Hynix traded flat. POSCO fell 3.16%, LG Chem fell 5.14%, while Hyundai Motors was up 0.35%, and Naver also up 0.13%. By sector, venture capital has been posting steady gains, with the sub-index up 10.58% today, as well as life insurance. The shipping industry is on the downward slope, on the other hand, along with housewares and retail.
And Tia, how did other markets across Asia perform overall?
Well, in the region, stocks mostly fell, with the Japanese yen gaining on the lingering possibility of North Korea conducting yet another hydrogen bomb test amid this ongoing exchange of threatening rhetoric between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Japan's Nikkei 225 showed early gains, but overall traded down 0.25%. The S&P 500 fell 0.3%, with the heavily weighted financial sub-index climbing, along with telecommunications stocks also on the rise. Greater China markets were lower after S&P downgraded China's sovereign credit rating to A+ from AA-, citing the mainland's credit growth as a risk. The downgrade from S&P put its rating in line with Moody's and Fitch. Over in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index was down 0.74%, while mainland markets saw more moderate losses. The Shanghai Composite slipped 0.23%. In the middle of all this, the Bank of Japan announced yesterday that it would keep its monetary policy steady, and Chinese banks are currently closely on the radar after the People's Bank of Korea reportedly informed other banks to adhere to the United Nations sanctions against North Korea.
Now, following the FOMC's decision to leave interest rates unchanged earlier this week, what impact has this had on the local front?
Well, Myung-gil, domestic analysts are saying that the outcomes of this meeting have rather held the Kospi back, saying that a certain level of a hawkish approach has rather put a damper on investor sentiment. Analysts say that tension is slowly growing across the bourse, with the Federal Reserve announcing a plan to start shrinking its massive bond holdings, as well as hinting at raising rates by the end of this year. But in general, there's optimism from a recovering economy from developed nations and emerging markets, with predictions saying that this flow will be continuing on until the next year, especially having considered the major strides for Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix in the first half of this year. The IT sector, as well as the finance sector, are expected to lead the second half in general, along with large conglomerates in the nation. Many are also eyeing the European Central Bank's decision coming up in October to potentially raise its interest rate, saying that it could boost momentum for local markets overall. This has been Lee Ji-hye for Business Daily.
The decline in car sales for Kia Motors has triggered a shift in its overtime work policies. Starting next Monday, the country's second largest automaker suspending overtime work after removing weekend shifts at the start of the month, with sales down 53% in China and 8.4% in the U.S. during the first 7 months of the year. Many unsold cars remain in its inventories. The company also lost a major lawsuit in August, with the court ruling that fixed bonuses and meal costs are a part of ordinary wages. The court ordered Kia to pay roughly $373 million in overdue wages and provide higher overtime and severance pay as well. Time now for a look at some important global news from the week, with Eunice Kim joining us in the studio. Hello, Eunice.
Hello, Myung-gyul.
So, let's delve deeper into the matter of fresh U.S. sanctions on North Korea. It's meant to cut off capital to and add significant pressures on Pyongyang. What could the wider repercussions be, Eunice?
Well, you know, we are already hearing strong words back from Pyongyang, Myung-gyul, and it's significant that this time around the response reportedly coming from state leader Kim Jong-un himself. According to a KCNA statement, the 30-something-year-old leader vowed the, quote, highest level of hardline countermeasure in response to President Donald Trump's rhetoric before the UN this week that the U.S. may be left with, quote, no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. North Korea's Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho surmised in New York that it could entail that hardline countermeasure could entail the largest test of hydrogen bomb in the Pacific Ocean, though he did backtrack a little bit and say the final decision rests with Kim Jong-un, this according to Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency. Now, these latest sanctions, as you heard from U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin earlier, essentially does make the parties choose. Is it business with North Korea or is it business with the U.S.? And already, if what President Trump has said is true, China's central bank has ordered its banks to wind down their business with North Korea. That could be a significant financial hit to Pyongyang. So, will it work? Combined with last week's UN sanctions that shut down North Korean textile exports and capped imports of refined petroleum products to 2 million barrels a year, this latest sanction, triggered by executive order, is reminiscent of a two-track approach we saw Washington use to get Iran to the bargaining table several years ago, one that targets industries as well as another at financial activities. But of course, it must be said here, Pyongyang is a much more isolated country from the world than Iran was, so much of its successes will rely on application from actors in China and Russia, two countries whose heads of state notably were absent at the UN General Assembly this week. Myung-gyul.
Right, but we did see a united front from the trilateral summit among President Moon Jae-in, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and U.S. President Trump, right?
Indeed. We saw them have lunch at the Lotte New York Palace Hotel on Thursday, this following President Moon's address before the General Assembly that morning. And while the three did show solidarity on placing, quote, maximum pressure on North Korea, it is no secret that President Moon is pushing for a more pacifist, peaceful resolution over, say, Trump's fiery rhetoric we heard this week. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, of course, has also been standing by the stance that pressure over dialogue is what is appropriate at this juncture. In fact, President Moon's overarching message this week in New York has been a case for peace, be it in promoting the Pyeongchang Olympic Winter Games in February for a peaceful athletic diplomacy, or urging global investors to invest in a peaceful, unified Korea of the future. Now, in his UN address, he spoke of his own connection to North Korea as the son of an unintended refugee when the country broke out into war and was, of course, then subsequently divided. This as he urged North Korea to take the path of cooperation.
어떤 형태의 흡수 통일이나 인위적인 통일도 추구하지 않을 것입니다. 북한이 이제라도 역사의 바른편에 서는 결단을 내린다면 우리는 국제사회와 함께 북한을 도울 준비가 되어 있습니다.
Now, let's go back to the issue of banks in China. Yesterday, the global rating agency S&P announced it was downgrading China's credit rating. And today, it also followed with a cut in Hong Kong's ratings as well.
That's right. And it cited institutional as well as political linkages to mainland China for this move. Also concerns for potential spillover effects in explaining their move. S&P lowered the Special Administrative Region's issuer credit rating to AA+. That's from AAA. And this after it had cut China's sovereign rating from AA- to A+ on Thursday. It was the first downgrade out of S&P for China since 1999, putting its ratings on par with counterparts Moody's as well as Fitch ratings. The U.S. ratings agency also slashed its ratings on HSBC China, Hang Seng China, and DBS Bank China, all of which are foreign banks that get most of their business from the mainland. And it did explain that they were at risk of defaulting, in their view, should China's sovereign debt begin showing signs of unsustainability. And before I go, some news out of the tech sector this week. Google has launched a $1 billion investment to strengthen its hardware unit. Its parent company Alphabet has agreed to pay $1.1 billion for the team at Taiwanese phone company HTC that develops Google's Pixel smartphones. The Silicon Valley giant will also acquire a non-exclusive license for HTC's intellectual property, but will not be taking a stake in HTC. The deal, which requires regulatory approval, is expected to be finalized by early next year.
Well, it seems Google wants its Pixel phones to better compete with other flagship carriers out there, so through acquiring the HTC.
Yet another potential player in this smartphone game.
Right. Thank you, Eunice.
You bet.
With Korea's population continuing to age rapidly, the number of deaths in the country are also increasing as well. According to Statistics Korea, the country reported over 280,000 deaths in 2016, up 1.8% from the year before. This is the highest death toll since relevant data started being collected 34 years ago. This is due to the growing number of deaths among senior citizens despite Korea's falling level of infant fatalities. With thousands of new homes hitting the property market in the second half of the year, banks are being urged to tighten lending rules on concerns over the country's rising household debt. Our Lee Ji-young has more.
Korea's massive household debt, which stood at roughly $1.2 trillion as of the end of June, has long been considered a risk factor that is holding back the country's growth potential. But with about 200,000 more homes to be added to the market in the second half of 2017, banks are being called to take preemptive measures and tighten their screening of home loan applications to help slow the growth of household debt.
The massive supply of homes in the second half may lead to an increase in group loans, which is driving up household debts. There could be a balloon effect, with many expected to take out loans on credit.
Korea had tightened lending rules for mortgages in early August, but the government says loopholes still exist where people can work around the new regulations to borrow money that exceeds their lending limits. In response, the government urged financial institutions to thoroughly review group loan applications and strengthen credit evaluations for small business owners. The Financial Services Commission is also set to announce a set of new follow-up measures next month to further tighten its grip on lending. This includes the adoption of the debt service ratio to better assess a borrower's repayment ability in hopes of minimizing delinquent loans that can potentially pop the country's household debt bubble. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
With diesel emissions being blamed as the main cause of Korea's air pollution problem, new technologies are being developed to combat the issue. Despite the emergence of a new product that drastically reduces emissions at a lower cost, its sales have been blocked after failing to be certified by the Ministry of Environment. Our Elliot Kim has more.
This is a specialized manufacturer of diesel particulate filters, or DPFs, which typically remove 85% of soot or more from diesel engine exhaust. The company spent 6 years developing the product, and its cost is only 1/10 of traditional products, while reducing emissions by 28% more and providing a 7% bump to fuel economy. Yet despite the innovative nature of the product, the item isn't flying off the shelves and remains grounded in storage.
I applied for a certification from the Ministry of Environment, but I didn't receive it. It apparently does not meet required conditions.
While current products reduce emissions by capturing and removing soot from engine exhaust post-combustion, this product works prior to the combustion process, preventing the particulate matter from ever being produced. Since the Ministry of Environment's current inspections only cover post-processing filters, the company has no way of obtaining the necessary certifications to begin sales. All the while, the initial production batch, worth some $2.65 million, sits in an abandoned warehouse. The manufacturer has even had trouble exporting the product. Unable to obtain domestic certification, it turned to German certification authorities and received excellent performance test ratings. Yet, overseas buyers have remained wary due to a lack of domestic sales. With concerns over airborne particulate matter increasing, stricter emission standards could be the shot in the arm the economy needs by creating a new market for groundbreaking products like this to thrive. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
Product customization is becoming more popular these days, and it's not simply about having more options. Some consumers are willing to go the extra mile, even if it means spending a bit more to ensure the product matches their taste and preferences. Our Oh Jung-hee tells us more.
Consumer trends are changing. People now favor not what's well known and popular, but what best reflects their individuality. While the fashion industry was the first to catch the changing trend offering customized fashion items, the shift is rapidly spreading to other industries like cars, watches, underwear, and more.
We're at the final stages of an era where companies compete through quality, as quality is now a given. Companies, while trying to differentiate themselves from others, start to develop products that can appeal to consumer sensitivity.
Until now, us consumers have had to choose which out of several products is closest to our needs and tastes. But now this is changing to us designing the product for ourselves so that it is customized to meet our unique needs.
Scentlier, a perfume brand in Korea, offers opportunities for consumers to create their own personalized aromas. Customers first set up a rough image of what type of perfume they want to make and then go through a variety of fragrances to select some that will become the base scents and additives. Everyone has different memories and feelings linked to a certain fragrance, and that's why putting together a number of scents that leave special impressions could represent a person's personality or memories.
Perfume is like an invisible dress. It is, after all, a fashion item. People choose clothes that best reflect their individuality, and the same goes for fragrances. Many customers have enjoyed finding out what kind of scent they like.
Korean cosmetics brand Laneige offers customers counseling sessions to find which moisture creams best suit their skin type. Customers are first asked about their skin problems and daily routine, and then the amount of water and oil in their skin is measured. After the test, the counselor recommends 1 out of 9 types of cream. The brand originally sold 3 types, but subdivided these into 9 after starting this counseling session, considering customers' various skin types.
It was surprising to discover that my actual skin type is different from what I thought. I'm satisfied I could take part in making and choosing my skin cream.
As goods and services become more and more customized, producers can't enjoy the cost advantages of mass production. But
customized marketing can draw in new customers who've not been participating in the market because goods were too standardized. It creates a new demand and new customer base. And the environment is better than ever now with social media spreading the news about customized products.
Some brands let customers design their own shoes online, offering different colors and patterns for each part of the shoe, which attracts people who want to have their own personalized shoes. But customization could reach another level if combined with 3D printing technology. The technology is now generally used to produce objects for medical use like artificial ears or design samples for architects. But the 3D printing enterprise Tuktak says the technology's potential is greater than just that and will eventually allow people to produce any three-dimensional object.
The 3D printing technology enables individuals' on-demand production. It's like having a machine that operates just for yourself. If you have a basic sample of a suit, a 3D printer can produce the same suit in a size that fits you perfectly. It's also possible to turn kids' drawings into three-dimensional toys.
Now, it's no longer a matter of quantity or quality, but individuality. Consumers are to play a bigger role than before, not just choosing one out of many, but taking part to make a one and only product for themselves. 오정희, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. But we'll be back next week with more of the day's top business stories. So don't forget to tune in then. Thank you so much for watching and have a great weekend.